lecture, and the lecture was publicized, but the statue was not publicized. And matter of fact, some of those like news articles that were on the university website um, are still up there. So everyone was aware, and no one has a problem with India or the Indian president coming to give a talk. So that didn't raise any suspicions or eyebrows or anything. So essentially,
Right.
the statue went up, and the way it started on campus, there was another movement off campus, and I really can't go into what that was, even though later on we ended up joining forces. But in terms of on campus,
Right.
it started when I was driving down the road and I looked to my left and I saw this new statue. And I said, "Oh, who is this?" And I said, "Wow, it's Gandhi." And I immediately first thought these people have no idea who Gandhi was. So I took a couple of snaps with my phone, and then I sent an email and actually counted how many. It was 52 exactly of his most racist quotes. Not all of his racist quotes, just some of them. So just sent that out. And that's what started the conversation on campus. So from there, we had a back and forth, dozens of people involved, scholars, professors, all throughout, because it's the university staff list. Um, and a lot of people were like, "Wow, we had no idea. We just saw the movie. We thought he was great. This is a surprise." And then, of course, you had the knee-jerk reaction, who's like, "Oh, I heard he was great. He must be great. I don't know what this is about." But it's really I actually just wrote an article for the print where I address this idea of cognitive dissonance. And essentially, this is what happens when people are confronted with new information that, doesn't gel with their current beliefs. Then they start trying to eventually rationalize or, dismiss or just ignore or avoid these things because it causes this type of, tension and uncomfortability in them. Now, that. The vice chancellor sent another email, and that was actually his entrance into the conversation. So he's the top person on campus, but he sent an email, and most likely he was the one who commissioned or allowed the thing to go through because it didn't go through the academic board, it didn't go through the normal bureaucratic channels. It just popped up on campus without any feedback from African studies or history or anyone who would be able to tell people this is who Gandhi is or was, and what he represents. To many people, is not what he's cracked up to be when you actually go into his racist actions and also his words against black people, whether it was black people in South Africa, black people in India, and these types of things. But he sent an email saying, "Oh, I think he changed when he got older." So that's where, I sent another email. I said he must have no idea who Gandhi was. So I sent another email going into his role in oppressing the Dalits while calling them Harijans, which is actually basically the, for lack of a better word, bastard children of Devadasis in the temples, which was a term coined in the 1400s. So people who just hear it, who aren't familiar with Hindi or that background, they're like, "Oh, that sounds like a great term." But it's very clear why the Dalits themselves do not like that term because that in and of itself is a disparaging term. Um, so yeah, he said, "Oh, I thought he changed." So I sent him lots of quotes from Gandhi, where he called the Chowdar Tank Satyagraha Duragraha because it goes against the deep-seated prejudices of upper caste Hindus. So even though the Dalits were using Gandhi's own, Satyagraha technique, he opposed them in very strong terms, which is ironic and hypocritical because later on he used a satyagraha technique of fasting unto the death in order to prevent the Dalits. Yes. Okay. I was saying that even though Gandhi said it's duragraha because they're using satyagraha against their own Hindu kith and kin, but then, like the hypocrite he was, he decided to use those same types of techniques in order to coerce them, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, into signing the Pune Pact which basically did away with their double vote and separate electorates. And the idea with that was the Dalits are not concentrated; they're usually at the outskirts of town and things like that, so they could never have a majority or represent themselves in any district or any area. So the idea was, in order for the Dalits to represent themselves, then they should have, these types of electorates to basically even give them somewhat of a level playing field. And Gandhi said that he would fast unto the death to prevent them from getting, their just due, which they were already awarded at that time. But, they had to go back on that because, Dr. Ambedkar was aware that if Gandhi died during this fast unto the death, there would be a massive pogrom and the Dalits would be held responsible. There would be a huge bloodbath. And later on, when he wrote about it in What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to the Untouchables, he said it was a vile and filthy act, of coercion. And he really, spoke in disparaging terms about it, as most Dalits do to this day. So yeah, I gave him all that background information, lots of quotes from Gandhi, quotes from Dr. Ambedkar, saying that Gandhi was the worst enemy of the untouchables, all these things. Because I'm like, what people didn't see is that they're looking only at continental Africans, but that's not how we're approaching it. We're like, he was against black people, whether they happen to be continental Africans or not, and he was for his Indo-Aryan, upper caste Hindu, fold. So he was always fighting for upper caste Hindus. He was never fighting for the black people there in India. And, even when we're talking about it, this thing of complexion has come up. And, for people who aren't very aware of Hinduism, it's not only, it's largely, based or related to complexion. So those who are darker tend to be in the lower caste or tend to be Dalits. And those who are light or white tend to be the upper caste Hindus. So it's not a direct correlation, but it tends to be that way. Similarly, if you're talking about racism, there are, light skinned people who are poor and dark skinned people who are rich, but that isn't how it tends to work, there either. So, just so that people could get a grip on exactly what was going on, that in terms of the symbolism, so there are colors associated with the different castes. So the Brahmins are associated with the color white. The Kshatriyas are associated with the color red. The Vaishyas are associated with the color yellow. And then black is for the Shudras and down. So, for people to even understand it, this is white on top, black on the bottom, just with quote unquote divine sanction in Hinduism. And this is the reason why, and people who don't understand why are continental Africans being attacked and killed in broad daylight, they're not able to put it into context that what they do to the black people who are there is the same thing that they're doing to the new black people who are showing up. And if you don't understand that, then it just is like, oh, I don't understand. Why are we getting beat up and killed and lynched? I always give the example of Masonda Ketanda Olivier out of the Congo, who was beaten to death in broad daylight. And all of these riots and lynchings and beatings, race riots there. The CDs who said they're, continually subjected to racism. And another thing that the Gandhi apologists do is they say, oh, it's just about words. Racism is not about saying mean things or saying words. If you look at Gandhi's actions in South Africa in this segregation of the Durban telegraph and post offices, if you look at his role in segregation of the jails, if you look at his role in the war against the Zulus, where he was agitating for arms, for guns and military training, he said the whole ambulance corps thing shouldn't last more than a few days. The real objective is to get weapons and military training. So this is the warmonger Gandhi, the real Gandhi, not the one who later lied and said, oh, my heart was with the Zulus. I bore no grudge against the Zulus. We have no indication that he even knew that they were called Zulus at the time. He said the Kafirs, and that's the other thing. People say, oh, Kafir wasn't a disparaging term at the time. Well, what about half-heathen savages, 1 degree removed from an animal? Are those terms of endearment in Hindi? I think not. Are those terms of endearment in Gujarati? I think not. And the thing that really betrays that he was aware that this is a derogatory term is that anytime he's talking, he says, it is offensive to use the term coolie. Do not call us coolie Marys or coolie doctors or coolie lawyers. This is so offensive. And then in the very next sentence, he's saying, and those kafirs over there. So he knows that this is a disparaging, because at the same time, we could just say, okay, well, then you shouldn't have a problem with coolie. These are all just terms. The British are calling the Indians coolies, so just go along with it. They're saying kafir, let's just go along with it. And that's not the case. And then you have other contemporaries of Gandhi from India, like Dr. Ambedkar, who magically found a way not to disparage the black people and call them kafirs. As a matter of fact, he linked his struggle against Gandhi and with the struggle of black people in the U.S. against Lincoln. So people think Lincoln was this huge emancipator. He was very racist, and he was very clear in terms of his stance. He just wanted to keep the Union together, and the demography issue was the same thing that Gandhi was dealing with. He just wanted to keep Hindus together so that he could have a majority. So he's not interested in Dalit rights. He's not interested in, the Dalits getting their just due. He's interested in the Hindus being a majority. Therefore, they don't have to, abdicate power to anyone else, whether that be Muslims or whatever. And that's also, if you look at Nathuram Godse, he talks about, Gandhi's role in the partition of India. So these are the things that we're dealing with. Very good. There were a few things. The first thing that I remember was in the early 90s. I was listening to a lecture by the noted historian in the U.S., a black man, Dr. John Henrik Clark, where he said that if Martin Luther King knew better or was able to, do more research, he would never have taken Gandhi as, someone to follow in his footsteps, because Gandhi was a faker, a fraud. He like listed all these things, and I was like, wow, those are very strong terms, because I had seen the movie by that point in time, where it's just like, this hagiography funded by the Indian government. Um, and so it made me interested in the subject. Now, it wasn't until later that Dr. Renoko Rashidi, a historian who deals with the black presence in early Asia, also talked about the plight of the Dalits and the Dalit Panthers and things of that nature. And that prompted me to read Dalit, the Black Untouchables of India by V.T. Rajshekhar, who, interestingly enough, is not a Dalit himself. But that's what really got me very sensitized to names like Baba Saheb Ambedkar and others. And that's where I started reading Ambedkar, what Congress and Gandhi have done to the untouchables, annihilation of caste, and really just to juxtapose them, how Dr. Ambedkar was saying we have to annihilate caste altogether, whereas Gandhi is like, if you annihilate caste, you annihilate Hinduism. There's scientific justification for caste and all these things. Um, Dr. Ambedkar said that caste is like a multi-story building without doors or ladders. Wherever you start, that's where you are for perpetuity. And he described it as a chamber of horrors. So like all of these things really sensitized me to it and really let me know that Gandhi was not the image that he's been portrayed to be, but rather he, throughout his entire life, was an enemy of black people. Yeah, a lot of the apologists say, oh, well, he grew up in a particular way. He was part of the Baniya caste, which is a subcaste of the Vaishyas, so forth and so on. Um, that really the core of it is that he was always fighting for his caste. No matter where he was located, he was always fighting for his caste and fighting against, black people. Some of the things that he said, some of the things that he did, they really tell us, and really his actions more than anything he said, because racism is more than just saying mean things. It's about the actions that you take in order to subjugate, oppress, specific people. So yeah, a lot of that really goes to the core of why he was racist, the things that he said, the things that he did throughout his life. So this is a major thing. So when we look at Gandhi fighting for his caste, it comes out very clearly in his writings at the time that he is not for, black people who he calls kafirs, savages, half heathens, so forth and so on. And that's for every single year that he was there, all the way up to he's just about to leave India. So every single year from 1893, thereabout, going all the way to 1913. He is always saying these Kafirs, we don't want to work with them. Even when he gets to striking, no, we're not trying to strike alongside these Kafirs. We don't want them to join us. So every single day, every single year he speaks on the subject, he's very, very, very clear. And the other thing is, in 1906, according to him in his autobiography, that's where he had this huge epiphany, this life changing brahmacharya vow, so forth and so on. But some of the worst things that he said and did were after that so called vow, because that's a revisionist type of thing. At the time he was writing, he didn't know, oh, later on, let me lie and say that I, changed my views on stuff. So at the time, that's where you get after that so-called vow in 1906, assuming that it ever happened, is where you get him saying that black people are one degree removed from an animal. That's where he is segregating the jails there. That's where he is, saying that they live like animals. That's where he's really going into his whole Kafir routine, half heathen, savage, so forth and so on. So he really gets vile after he supposedly had this life-changing, epiphany. So, yeah, really getting to the core of it. When you actually read what Gandhi wrote at the time, not what he decided to lie about later. And this is a thing, he duped so many people with his autobiography. And those people didn't have a chance to fact check because it wasn't until 1998, 99, thereabout, that you have access to his writings, especially the ones in Hindi and Gujarati. So, when I go through, and I'm not looking at it right now, but I've gone through, and, if you are reading the collected works, it says, oh, from the original Gujarati or from the original, Hindi or whatever. How in the world are these, black people who can't read Gujarati or Hindi supposed to be able to know this is what he's saying about them? And then even more so, how are they supposed to know that he was actually lying until they could go back and check, oh, in 1906, what did he say? 1907, what did he say? 1908, what did he say? 1909, 1910, 1911, 1912, 1913, right before he goes back to India. And then once he goes back to India, what was he saying in fighting against the Dalits and, condemning their satyagraha and condemning and forcing them to sign the Pune Pact? Because if you don't have access to this research, to his own words, and his daughter Ella was saying, "Oh, people must have read one book, and now they're condemning him." The only book you need to read or volumes you need to read is the collected works. You understand? So yeah. And not only that, he was also saying highly inflammatory stuff in English. But again, if you don't have access to the collected works, so Martin Luther King was assassinated in the 60s. So how in the world is he going to have access to this? And beyond that, I'm actually working on an article that's dealing with Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, and Gandhi, and why all three of them are pushed down the throats of black people as those are your heroes. Those are your heroes. Those are not the ones who I ever look up to personally. Now, I can't speak for the entire black race, but me personally, I never look up to any of those three. But there's a reason why our white enemies shove them down our throats as these are your heroes. These are the best of your race. And no, they are not, in my humble opinion. And why? Because in all three places, whether we're talking about the US, Martin Luther King, whether we're talking about South Africa, Nelson Mandela, or India, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, in all three cases, black people are subject to genocide. That's according to the UN definition of what genocide is, which entails killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm to members of the group, bringing about conditions to destroy the group in whole or in part, transferring children of the group from one group to another, and also instituting measures in order to prevent births within the group. Those are the UN five conditions to determine whether a people are subjected to genocide. And in the article, we go into in the US, black people are subject to all five of those conditions. In South Africa, subjected to all five of those conditions. In India, the blacks are subject to all five of those conditions. Now, in all three cases, we are told by those three that the solution to our problem, that first off, our problem in the US is we're not integrated. So once we integrate with these white enemies who are subjecting us to genocide, then our problems are solved. So Martin Luther King is telling us the ones who are stabbing us, killing us, lynching us, and subjecting us to genocide Our whole problem is we're not close enough to them. Just get closer. It's like someone who has a knife and is chopping you and stabbing you in the chest, and they're telling you that the solution is just go closer to them. You understand how insane is that? So it's intentional that they're misdiagnosing the problem and therefore giving us a solution that's never a solution, but rather exacerbates our problem of genocide. That's in the US. Now look at the same thing in South Africa. All five conditions of genocide, and now we're being told a misdiagnosis of the problem. The problem is apartheid. Matter of fact, you can't even discuss anything in South Africa without talking about apartheid, post apartheid, oh, the apartheid era. That's not our problem. That's not our issue. The issue is we're subjected to genocide. However, we're taught that the problem is that you're just apart from these Dutch Boers and whoever, so just get closer to them and now shut up. Your problem is resolved. And then the same thing in India, that we're told that the problem is untouchability. What Dr. Ambedkar diagnosed is that the problem is caste. We need to annihilate caste. Can you hear me? Sagar, Sagar, can you hear me? Okay. Yes, I can hear you. So in India, we're being told that the problem is untouchability. You can't touch us. You can't come into our temples. You can't draw water from the tank or wherever. So therefore, we'll allow you to touch us. You can come close enough to touch us, and now shut up. You don't have any issues. No, the problem is genocide. So once we know the problem is genocide, then we need to know what do we need to do about those Indo-Aryans, Indo-Europeans who are subjecting us to genocide. But because they have misdiagnosed the problem, now they just say, we'll allow you to touch us now, and now shut up. You can't say anything. So all three are shoved down our throats as these are the heroes you should look up to, but these are not our heroes. And when we choose heroes from ourselves, that's where we'll choose someone like a Marcus Garvey. Where's our Marcus Garvey statue here at University of Ghana? Then we'll choose someone like Mangaliso Sobukwe. Most people don't even know who Mangaliso Sobukwe is, much less can we follow in his footsteps. You understand? In India, that's where we would hear about an Ambedkar. If you want to give us a statue, give us a statue of an Ambedkar. That's someone who we can relate to, and that's someone who, in his life and in his writings, related to us as Black people, right? Well, first off, let's dispel the myth of Gandhi's nonviolence. Now, Gandhi supported the Boer War. He supported the Bambata Rebellion. He supported World War One, where he said that home rule without military power is useless. And then he recruited heavily and told people that they should think well and get involved in the war. You understand? He's writing letters to Roosevelt about how to win the war. So in everything, there's a difference between the image that's projected and then what the person actually was. Now, people prefer the image, which is a lie, over than the substance of the person, which is the truth. Now, you can actually read all the things that he is writing from himself, not from this is Dr. Kamban saying it, this is whatever. You can actually read his own documentation of how he supported every major war in his lifetime. Now, how nonviolent is that? How nonviolent is that in terms of your actions? Now, there's a whole, whatever aura of Gandhi, nonviolence, whatever. Now, even let's look at the techniques that he used in South Africa, this whole nonviolent non-cooperation, that there's essentially not much difference between what he did with relation to the British and what upper caste Hindus do with relation to the Dalits in terms of their oppression, that they're not going to socialize with them. Basically, it's like a social strike. Okay. So,
Please go ahead.
all right, no
Yeah.
problem. So this is a one thing. So even just in terms of the nonviolence, we have to take a very careful look at that based on his writings, not based on the impropaganda, which is improper
Mhm.
propaganda about Gandhi. We need to actually read how he supported in the Bambasa Rebellion. He's saying we need guns. He's saying there's a Firearms Act, so that should give us the ability to get guns. We need military training. So all of these things, how nonviolent is that? Again, World War One. This is 1918 that we're talking about. World War Two. We're talking about what, the 40s. Exactly where is this nonviolence? But even in terms of the techniques that he's using, this non-cooperation is the technique that upper caste Hindus use in order to oppress the Dalits, that we won't sell to you, we won't interact with you, whatever. He just basically applied what they do to the Dalits now to the British. So the British got a taste of how lower caste Hindus are treated on a daily basis by these upper caste Hindus. So there's not very much revolutionary in terms of that technique. He didn't invent that technique of, let's ignore, let's strike, let's not support them, let's boycott them on every single level in social. That's what the Dalits are subjected to. You understand? So if we want to talk about how effective that technique is, you have to go deep into the racist, casteist Hindus in order to see the origins of that type of policy towards any type of group in society. Now, in terms of their support for Gandhi, that's what I would expect. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to, upper caste Hindus should love Gandhi because he was a staunch, upper caste Hindu. Even what he did, even and what led to his assassination of trying to make sure that Hindus got the demographic edge once Swaraj comes, right? So he understands, okay, Swaraj is about majority rules. So how can we make sure, one, the Dalits aren't able to escape this torture chamber, right? How can he? So that's all about demographics. How can he make sure that the Muslims don't get a foothold? So whether that's in the partition of India or whatever, he's going to do whatever he needs to do to make sure that the Hindus are the majority and that their power never falls. You understand? That's what Gandhi is all about when you read Gandhi himself, right? So I would expect upper caste Hindus to rush to his defense at every time. Now, in terms of the lower castes, Hindus and scheduled castes and CDs and all these other groups, scheduled tribes, whatever, then I would expect for them to do exactly what I've been hearing. So I've gotten all types of emails from Dalit saying, we appreciate the solidarity. Thank you for getting this view out. The article I wrote for the print. And also have a book chapter where I make this link to the struggles of the Dalits and black people in the U.S. Now this is also what's ironic that we have people who pretend to be progressive, Marxists, and socialists, and they're aligning with the upper caste Hindus and against the downtrodden Dalits. They're saying, oh, this may cause a rift between the governments of India and Ghana, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look at how ironic this would be if I didn't know that they're hypocrites already. So they're aligning with the upper caste Hindu oppressors against the black people who are fighting for the dignity and rights of black people, regardless of location. Look at this. You understand? They even started a Gandhi Must Stand petition. How ironic is this? These black people who are ahistorical and apolitical and don't understand anything about geopolitics are now aligning with upper caste Hindus, the BJP. Look at this. They're aligning with Modi because they don't understand anything about history and they don't understand about contemporary geopolitics. So they are aligning with upper caste Hindus who would just as soon as lynch them and dismember them and burn their bodies and rape them as to shake their hand. So that's really the core of it, is that Dalits, just like black people throughout the world, we have to have our own media. We have to have our own outlets in order to get our stories out. If you're if you're expecting a fox to guard the chicken house, if you're expecting a cat to guard the milk, then the milk isn't going to be in very good shape. And that's actually what Gandhi suggested. He said that the Dalits should be under the trusteeship of the Hindus because they are a threat to themselves. They're so ignorant that they can't look after their own interests. So therefore, the Hindus should look after their interests. Now, what has that led to? It's led to pogrom after pogrom after pogrom from the 60s all the way up to today. You have the Hindus who are supposed to be entrusted with the guardianship of the Dalits. And how do they express that guardianship? By raping, pillaging, plundering, dismembering, lynching, burning alive these Hindus. And at one point in time, I used to follow it very closely that, several times per week, this Dalit woman was burned alive because she asked for wages that was due to her, or because the shadow of this Dalit fell on the shadow of a Brahmin. He was lynched, dismembered, burned up. All these stories. Every single day of the week, we get these stories. So for me, I was in the U.S. at that time. I'm very sensitive to those stories because it reminds me of the lynching that black people underwent. at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan and so forth and so on, or in South Africa.
right,
You understand? So
right.
I empathize with those Dalits because I'm like, this is what happened. And Gandhi also
Mhm.
made that same link because when he was in South Africa, he said that the British and the Indians arise from a common stock, the Indo-Aryans. So as fellow colonists, they need to unite against these black Kafirs. So he's clear on
Right.
who he aligns with. So we as black people need to be clear on who we should align with.
Mhm.
And we need our
Right.
own media. You can't expect your
Right.
enemies to do anything other than be enemies to you. And that's exactly what we're seeing
Mhm.
right now in the media and in every other sphere of activity.
Mhm. Right. Right. Uh, Sir, I'd like to ask you that why do you think there has been no counter effort on the international stage uh, to what India uses Gandhi's statue as a soft power to project its soft power, and you have said that India has been going on installing these statues to keep this picture or image of itself as a soft power or probably as a protector of non-violence or the democracy. But why has there been no counter campaign against this?
Well, there have been campaigns against Gandhi statues. Matter of fact, Colonel G.B. Singh, who is a Sikh, has been at the forefront
Mhm.
of this from at least the 90s, if not the late 80s. And he could speak to it more in terms of when he started that campaign. But he came to my notice, way back, where he was fighting against these statues, being placed all throughout the U.S., so forth and so on. So there have
Mhm.
been these types of narratives, counter narratives. He has Behind the Mask of Divinity, one book. He has several books. Gandhi Stretcher Bearer of Empire is another book that came out by other scholars of Indian descent, Desai Vahed. So there have been these counter narratives. They just haven't been as mainstream up until I would say now when BBC picked up this story, Guardian, Al
Right.
Jazeera, so forth and so on. So the counter narrative is finally starting to gain ground. But most people aren't even aware of one thing I'd like to highlight, which is this proxy war with China.
Right.
So
Right.
India is in a proxy
Right.
war with China. You remember the border dispute there, at the
Right.
border of
That's the
Bhutan,
word.
exactly.
Right.
So everyone is aware that whoever controls Africa controls the world, whether you're talking about
Right.
nuclear resources, whether you're talking about gold, diamond, bauxite, you name it, coltan, whoever controls Africa
Right.
controls the world. So
Right.
ever since 2014, and this is the other thing in terms of hypocrisy, that what Modi is doing is he's really mirroring Gandhi, which is to present a face
Mhm.
of nonviolence while really being about violence. So ever since Modi took
Mhm.
power in 2014, India has been the number one importer of arms. So while they're shipping
Right.
statues out to project an image of nonviolence, what they're really about in terms of substance is violence. Number one importer of arms on the entire planet Earth. And that's before you even go into the nuclear capability. But we'll even say that that's secondary to if you're so much about nonviolence, why are you importing more arms than anyone? You understand?
Right.
So, that's actually
Right.
what it's about. And you can look at how he's really drawing inspiration for the real Gandhi, which is let's project an
Mhm.
image of nonviolence while supporting every single major war in his entire lifetime. There is no
Right.
difference between those two. What India is doing as a state under the BJP and what Gandhi was doing as an individual throughout his lifetime, which is a rhetorical ethic. In your rhetoric, you
Mhm.
have one ethic, but in your actual action, you're doing the exact opposite. You understand? And this
Mhm.
is even, if you
Right.
look at the Vedas, you have all these different stories about, this divinity or that divinity who does the same thing, who puts up one front, but then on another level is doing the opposite in order to gain victory. You understand?
Right.
So these are some of the
Right.
things that if we were actually aware that this is very consistent, right? Say one thing,
Mhm.
do another. This is very consistent,
Right.
throughout,
Right.
even their scriptures. And in that, they actually get divine sanction for these types of maneuvers. So again,
Right.
to look at a counter narrative, we can expect the BJP or anyone, an upper caste Hindu, to do anything
Mhm.
other than lie, about this facade of nonviolence while actually being about violence. And people who are saying, "Oh, the government of India," all of the solidarity messages I've gotten from India show very clearly that this isn't an India versus Ghana thing. We're actually getting so much solidarity from those downtrodden people there in India, from Siddhis, from Dalits, from Sikhs. You
Right.
understand? We have an ongoing email thread with all of these people out of India who are really like, it's high time that the lie is blown apart, exploded, so that we can finally get to the truth. And if we're not dealing with the truth, we can't expect for, peace to reign among people.
Right. Right, but Dr. Oppenheimer, you know
Yeah,
that we, in the last 70 years since our independence, we never had a Dalit prime minister or a backward class, the Adivasi,
I'm aware.
who are the indigenous people here,
Right.
prime minister. So obviously the state has always been ruled by upper caste here. I want to ask you, do you see a backlash of this campaign in Ghana University? We hear that there is Indian government has already cancelled a scholarship in the name of Gandhi for probably 2,000 students. Uh, how are you going to convince your students there? And do you see more such backlash from India?
This is the thing. A lot of, let me not say a lot, the the upper class, if we want to call them that, mainly the Speaker of the House, Mike Okwe, has been saying, ever since the whole thing started a couple years ago, oh, India may get
Mhm,
mad, oh, it may affect diplomatic relations. And my point of
mhm.
view has been, why in the world should diplomatic relations be predicated on accepting something that is a high insult against your dignity? If there's
Right,
a place that says the only way that we can have diplomatic relations is with you on the bottom and us on top, from you accepting a slap in the face, that's the only way that we all relate to you. We have to ask ourselves,
right,
what is India looking for from Ghana? Ghana has gold,
right.
Ghana has oil, Ghana has all these things. So we need to stop looking at it from the position of being beggars and start thinking,
Mm.
India's trying to deal with us. They're coming to us. Why are they coming to us? You understand? And sorry, that was another call that just tried to come through. All right. So if we understand that this is what India is trying to do, they're trying to come in, then we need to start thinking about it in those terms. Now, in terms of the scholarship story, it said, I read that entire story at the bottom. It said that these students have started a petition. I've scoured online multiple times. I haven't seen a sign of any petition. I've looked at change.org, petition.com, all these different petition sites. I haven't seen any petition. So I'm even wondering, the degree to which this is true, because as a researcher, I'm trying to follow up and try to get another source. I only saw one source for that story, but it's proliferated from that original source, and people are just quoting that original
Right.
source. So I don't know if this is fake news. I don't know if it's real news, and I haven't been contacted by a single student in Ghana or outside of Ghana. So I haven't been contacted. Yes, sorry, that was a call again. I haven't been contacted by a single student inside Ghana or outside of Ghana about this, but what I've gotten in terms of comments is that these students are self-interested sellouts if they're saying that we should sell our dignity over the fact that they have a scholarship, that they have been, if that is the case, then they've been bought and sold by the Indian government. But now let's look at this. Do we have politicians or do we have prostitutions? This is the question, because if they come down on the wrong side of history, we've seen that India is the one who built the presidential seat of government, which is called Jubilee House. They've also pledged 200 million to build a new parliament building. So what they're telling you is, we've bought parliament and we've bought your president. After this whole Gandhi statue issue, we saw the president of Ghana with a representative of India holding a check for $1 million for renovations of the presidential seat of government, Jubilee House. So, what India is telling us in very clear terms is that we've bought all of your lawmakers and executives, right? Now, for those of us who are not buyable and are not interested in being bought and sold, we don't care about any of those things. So if they are saying that they are going to sell Mama Africa out as a prostitute and they'll play the role of pimp. None of us are interested in those types of things. So whether it's the government who's gotten some money from India, whether it is students who are getting scholarships from India, they need to stand up and grow a backbone and say, we don't need that. If your scholarship is predicated solely on the insult to the dignity of African people, and this is the flip side of that, is that we don't even know our own African heroes and heroines, right? The oldest book in the history of the world is the Instructions of Ptahhotep, and it was written right here in Africa by someone who called himself Kemeti, which means a black person. There's no, not only is there no statue of him, his name is Ptahhotep, but there is no, the people here don't even know he existed. You understand? Now, if we're going to be objective, the author of the oldest book in the history of the world, and we're supposed to be at an institution of higher learning, how come none of our students even have heard his name? Because he called himself a committee and he depicted himself as a committee, a black man. Let's continue. The first multi genius in the history of the entire planet Earth, his name was Imhotep, and he also called himself committee, which means a black man. Now, not only is there no statue of him at the premier university here in Ghana, the students here have never even heard his name a day in their life. You understand? So, if we're going to choose between someone who said that we're half heathen, 1 degree removed from an animal, savage, heathen, pagan, so forth and so on, all these terms, let's compare the two. Gandhi on those terms, or the first multi genius in the history of the entire planet Earth. Not the first in the history of Africa, the history of the entire planet Earth. How come we know about Gandhi, we don't know about Imhotep? And I could go down the list. Go ahead, Sagar, you had something. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? No problem. No problem. So I was going down the list of heroes and heroines that we don't know about. The world's first female medical doctor in the history of the entire planet Earth. Her name was Pesachet, right? And not only do we not have a statue of her, we don't even know that she exists. Well, I'm talking about African people, a woman here in Africa. Now, this is someone who the entire world should know, but not Africans have no idea who she was. If we talk about the very first female ruler in the history of the entire planet Earth, Sobek Neferu, right here in Africa, we've never even heard her name. If you go throughout the entire campus, if you get more than just me who knows her name, I would be very shocked. You understand? But meanwhile, we don't get statues of any of these luminaries. What we get is Gandhi, the one who was against the Zulus, who we call Kafirs, and then lied about it. He said his heart was with the Zulus when really he was trying to shoot them down. So this is really the core of what we're dealing with. So for me, I'm not so interested in the backlash. The question is, where's the Ghanaian backlash? Where are black people who have enough of a spine, enough of a backbone to stand up and say, who are we as African people, and to show solidarity with the downtrodden Adavasis, to show solidarity with the Dalits, to show solidarity with the Sidis. We have all of these people there in India, but instead of aligning with them, we're aligning with who? The upper caste Hindus who would rather burn you alive than to shake your hand. What is really going on here? Well, first off, just in terms of the supposed Peter Maritzburg train incident, there's a very good text that you should read. It's called Gandhi Under Cross Examination, and in it, it goes into this supposed train incident happened in 1893, but he didn't even think it up until 1909. Now, for those who have read the collected works of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, you know that anything that ever happens to him, he writes it down. It's like to the point if he sneezes or trips over a rock, it's going to hit the paper at some point in time. But it wasn't until 16 years after that fraud incident was supposed to have happened that he ever wrote anything about it. And it was only after Reverend Doak came to him and asked him, "Are you ready to be a martyr?" And then they cooked up this supposed incident. Now, he published on the incident 4 times in his life, and not one single version is the same as the other version. In one version, he says that he was boxed in the ears, and the next version, he was punched in the face and almost knocked off his feet. In one version, he says he went into this station, and it was so dark he couldn't see anyone. And the next one, it was so light and there was someone there, and he was afraid of that person. And one, there was no one in the room, and the next one, there's someone in the room, and he's scared of that one. And one, he continued along to Pretoria with no further incident. And the next one, he was beaten several times on the way there. So basically, there's no way that if we're dealing with this in terms, right? So basically, if we're dealing with this in terms of, let's pretend like he's under the court of law and he's being examined, there's no way that this supposed witness testimony would ever fly when it's like, okay, what is it? Is there no one in the room or is there someone there? Is it this or is it that? Did you get punched or did you not get punched? Was there no further incident or did you get beat up all the way there? Was it this, that this whole incident, we have to really, really, if you're reading his own writings on it, you have to really be highly suspect that this supposed incident ever took place, as opposed to being something that he concocted later on. 16 years. 16 years. My daughter isn't even 16 years old. That's a long time that it wasn't even cooked up until 1909 that they even decided to say, this is a good way to get sympathy. Gandhi, are you ready to be a martyr? This is the best way, through lies. And this is really where I see the change from honest, racist Gandhi to lying, casteist Gandhi. And I actually prefer the honest, racist Gandhi to the later on one who lied about everything, lied about his role in the Zulu War, lied about his supposed nonviolence when he's actually advocating to go to war in 1918. That the lying one is actually the one who is far more devastating, the one who coerces the Dalit people into the Puna Pact. That I don't like either of the two personally, but out of the two, if I had to choose, I would choose the wolf, the one who lets you know that he is your enemy, as opposed to the fox, the one who smiles in your face when really his actions are disenfranchising the Dalits, are disenfranchising all of the minorities there in India, the so-called backward caste, scheduled caste, lower caste, the CDs, so forth and so on, Adivasis, I think I said. All of these people are still suffering from his actions, and they can't get any recourse because everyone is so enamored with his lies, or impropaganda, as we call it, right? So I've mentioned in other interviews that the main difference between Gandhi and Dyer is simply one of opportunity, that Gandhi was advocating for firearms to take a share in the defense of the colony in order to fight the Kafirs, to fight the Kafir rebels with firearms. He wasn't talking about, oh, let's do ambulance corps. He only had to settle with the ambulance corps when they were not allowed to join on a military basis. And then even after the ambulance corps was there, he said this shouldn't last any more than a few days, that we have to be suffering the ambulance corps, that later on will show that we deserve military training. Then we'll get firearms. The Firearms Act. So everything he's talking about is firearms to shoot who? Not the British, not other Indians, but to shoot who he calls the Kafirs, to use his preferred term. Not only his preferred term, the only term that he was willing to use just about throughout all of his writings. So that's what he wanted to do, was to shoot down the Kafir rebels, to shoot down the Kafir rebels. Now let's look at Colonel Dyer. Colonel Dyer was given the opportunity to have firearms, and he used them in the Amritsar massacre, also called the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So in that, you had this festival, people were going to the festival, and they didn't get word that, okay, you're not allowed to meet in groups larger than 4 or 5, whatever it was. So Colonel Dyer says, okay, he's blocking off the entrance to Jallianwala Bagh, and then he shoots down all of these Indians who are just there to worship, the Sikhs or whoever who are just there to worship as part of their festival. So now let's look at the comparison. So I'm drawing an analogy, which I think is a very good analogy. If Gandhi had the opportunity to get firearms, he would have done exactly what Colonel Dyer did. And what I said is, okay, that's a very painful point in the history of India, right? That Colonel Dyer shot up all of these Indian people. Now, imagine if we as Ghana say we're part of the Commonwealth, and as part of the Commonwealth, you had so many people who said Colonel Dyer was a fine, upstanding man. Let's send them a statue of Colonel Dyer and say that diplomatic relations are predicated on you accepting this statue, which is a slap in your face. You understand? If we did that, the whole world, or at least India, who knows who Colonel Dyer was, the whole world doesn't even know who he was, but all of India would be up in arms and say, how in the world would you predicate diplomatic relations in accepting this slap in the face on the basis that we're all part of the Commonwealth? We will never accept this, right? However, from our end, this is the shoe on the other foot. From our end, we're expected to accept the slap in the face of someone who would have shot down as many Kafirs as he had bullets if only he got the opportunity according to his own writings, right? So it's a very clear and very direct analogy. And the only difference between Gandhi and Dyer is again one of opportunity, that they didn't see Indians as being on the level of the other British. And the ones who did get firearms were the ones who killed over 4,000 Zulus, are the ones who flogged another 7,000, and then another 4,000 were tortured, right? And then after they were tortured, Gandhi had the nerve to write that, oh, those who are up in arms about this Bambata outrage, that it's actually calm compared to what happened in Cairo. So he's like, there's no, based on what happened in Cairo, this is his own writings. You shouldn't say anything about what happened to the Zulus because that one is even moderate compared to what happened in Cairo to the British forces there. So not only was he not sympathetic or empathetic to the Zulus, he was rather justifying the death of over 4,000 Zulus, the flogging of another 7,000, and torturing and all these things that happened to all of the rest of them. Yes, I kind of touched on that previously, but just for the sake of clarity, that again, yes, can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me? Hello? Yes, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you clearly. I can hear you. Let me call back. I'll call back. Very good. So, there are a lot of similarities, and a lot of those similarities are drawn by Dr. Ambedkar in what Congress and Gandhi have done to the untouchables, also in the annihilation of caste. But the main thing is, it's a correlation, so it's not causation. You can't say, oh, automatically anyone who is a light skinned, quote unquote, Indo Aryan is automatically going to be Brahmin, but they tend overwhelmingly to be the Brahmins or those of the upper caste. And then vice versa, you can't tell that the someone who's dark skinned is automatically going to be a Shudra or any of the Dalits. But again, there's an extremely strong correlation between the two. And Dr. Ambedkar himself, he spoke against the idea of the Aryan invasion. However, when you look at Indo-Aryan as a linguistic group, you see very strong correspondences between Sanskrit and Latin and all of these other so-called European languages. So like you see the correspondences like pater and father and all these types of things, which show you that on a linguistic level that there's definitely a correlation between the language of these whites who are in northern India and the whites who are in western Eurasia. So that's very clear. Now, you had before those Aryans were there, whether they came as a military invading force or whether they came little by little, you have indigenous people who are there, the Adavasis. You have others who are very dark. Why? One, they're close to the equator and they haven't undergone the genetic changes that went on, such as the gene SLC24A5 during the worm glaciation. The thing that makes whites white, they didn't undergo that. They're in, all humanity came from Africa and they didn't undergo a mutation. They're still on the equator or close thereby. So they're still black people. So again, you see a very strong correlation that those people who were already there before the North Indian Aryans came, however they came, they're still very dark and they're the ones who are at the lowest rung of this caste system. And those who are outcasts, those who are Dalits, who don't even figure in the four major Varnashrama Dharma, right? So those are the black people. So one, you see that just in terms of skin color, but beyond that, in terms of how racism is systemic. So one thing that I've seen by these upper caste Hindus who are Gandhi apologists, they say, oh, well, he changed what he was saying later on in life. He didn't use the term kafir later on in life. And what that does is it does an injustice to what racism is about and what casteism is all about, which is a set of actions which disenfranchise, oppress, repress a people, suppress a people, every single type of, death, destruction, lynching, murder is justified under this system of action, of behavior, right? So it's not just, oh, I'm saying mean things to you. I'm saying something that's not nice to you, and I'm going to stop saying mean things. Therefore, that means I'm not racist. That if you look throughout Gandhi's life, you see what he's doing is fighting against black people regardless of location. So if he's in South Africa, he's fighting against black people. If he's in India, he's fighting against black people. And he's fighting for his upper caste Hindus, who are those whites who are still in North Africa. So if you look at Bollywood, you don't see representation of the Adivasis. You definitely don't see representation of Dalits as the predominant view of there. And here they have Kumkum Bhaja. We get all these telenovelas, soap operas out of India, and all we see are people who look whiter than the whites who I grew up with in the U.S., right? Southern U.S., North Carolina, you have these so-called rednecks, and they're red because they're in the sun too much. So I see all these pale white Eurasian enemies of black people, and that's who Gandhi was fighting for. And even what he instituted in South Africa was for a multi-level caste-like system of whites on top, and then the yellows, that's his Vaishya Baniya caste in the middle, and then blacks on the bottom. Now, how different is that from, the white Brahmins on top, Kshatriya red in the middle, Vanyas underneath that, and then the black Shudras underneath. That is the correlation is so stark that you would have to be feigning complete idiocy in order not to recognize it. So again, Gandhi was very clear on it. Dr. Ambedkar is very clear on it. But amazingly, we're all supposed to play stupid like we don't see exactly what's going on. I think the best tool against improper Gandhi is the collected works of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, aka Mahatma, which I don't use because Dr. Ambedkar also did not use it. He said he's never called him that. He refuses to call him that. And he won't call him that, nor do I. I think Gandhi's own words, this isn't opinion. This isn't, oh, I just don't like him. I think his own words are the best tool to dispel all improper Gandhi. What did he say and how did he document his actions against black people all throughout his entire life? Whether that's segregating the lavatories in the jail, making sure they don't have to be next to who he called 1 degree removed from the animal, his role in segregating the Durban post offices, to institute a multi-caste like system of apartheid, his fight against the Dalits, in terms of their double vote and special electorates. If you just read his own words, you can supplement it from others. You can supplement it with Dr. Ambedkar. You can supplement it with others. But I think that's the number one tool to go beyond improper Gandhi, which is really his autobiography. That's really the core of it. You see it before in, Satyagraha in South Africa, the Doke one. But really, the later one, that's really where he starts, going hard in terms of lying straight up about his role in the Bambata Rebellion, lying hard about his so-called epiphany, lying hard about all these things. And those like Mandela, those like Martin Luther King, who are again not my heroes, but those who take them as heroes, they were steeped in ignorance in terms of and ignorance not in the sense of something pejorative, but literally they had no means of reading Gujarati, they had no means of reading Hindi, they had no access to his complete volumes to see. Okay, he said he had his epiphany in 1906. Let me read what he was saying in 1907. Wow, that's worse than 1906. Let's read what he wrote, because then they would see, because nothing in Mandela's works do you see him saying, oh, by the way, Gandhi lied, but I'm going to forgive him for lying. That lets you know he had no idea that Gandhi was lying about those things. He thought he was saying, oh, he changed his views. Okay, all right, let's forgive him from his early views. But at what point in time does he say, let's forgive him for lying? That lets you know that he had no idea he was lying. And I'm saying that we should not forgive him for lying. We should hold him accountable for lying and then take steps from there. So again, there's no tool like the collected works. They were meant as a shrine to their idol of Gandhi. But what's actually happening is undoing Gandhi, because Gandhi himself had no idea that he was going to be called to account for the lies, bold-faced lies. He had no idea that he would be called to account for that. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And I also appreciate the opportunity. This is the first interview on the issue that I've had with a Dalit. It's always been upper caste Hindus, mainly Vaishyas because they control the media. So the print, right? The print that I, right, right. So, and again, continued solidarity. I think black people throughout the world, no one is going to save us but us. No one is going to get the word out but us. So, we really have to come together on the basis of what we have in common, regardless of location. This isn't just about Ghanaians and it's not just about continental Africans. It's black people, regardless of location. So, again, solidarity from us for your struggle of centuries and centuries and centuries against these upper caste Hindus. Yeah, and I really am thankful for Dr. Ambedkar because it's so rare, especially at that time, for a Dalit to be able to reach his level and articulate all of these things, the way he did, and to make these connections with black people in other places like he did, the link between Gandhi and Lincoln and how similar it is, those types of things. So, again, very much solidarity from our front. And, I'm very hopeful that in the future, black people, regardless of location, Adavasis, Dalit, CDs, all the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes who are the indigenous people who have been oppressed for untold centuries, can rise up and reclaim our place in the world. Oh, and also look up the work of Dr. Runoko Rashidi, because he was one of the main ones. I mentioned his name before, but he's written on the African presence in early Asia, the black people, depictions of black Buddha, and things of that nature. So he was also someone, he taught through my site, abibitumi.com, for about 2 or 3 years, and he really focused on that. So he was very big in sensitizing me to the issues. So also look up his work. Okay, Runoko. That's Runoko. Runoko. O, right? And then last name Rashidi. 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 Right? Okay. All right. Okay, so I appreciate it once again and have a good day. Okay. Bye bye.